Hello and welcome back. Every week, we open up a book that's changed how thousands of people think, work, or live, and we pull out the one idea worth taking with you long after the video ends. Today's book is one you're going to want to sit with. So get comfortable and let's get into it. A man decides for the 5th January in a row that this is finally the year he stops eating junk food. He clears out his fridge, buys a gym membership, downloads a habit tracker, and tells everyone he knows about his new commitment. By February, the fridge has junk food in it again. Not because he's weak, not because he doesn't want it badly enough. He wanted it exactly as badly the previous 4 Januaries too. Here's the uncomfortable question Benjamin Hardy asks at the very start of his book. What if willpower was never actually the thing standing between you and the life you want? What if you've been fighting the wrong battle every single January for years? That's the entire argument of willpower doesn't work. And Hardy's answer will change where you actually spend your effort, starting today. Stay with me. This one undoes a piece of advice you've probably believed your whole life. Asterisk, a simple truth to start asterisk. Here's the plain truth Hardy opens with, and it directly contradicts the entire self-help industry built around discipline and grit. Willpower is a finite, easily depleted resource, not a character trait you either have or lack. Relying on it as your primary strategy for change is, statistically, a losing bet, no matter how much you genuinely want the outcome. Hardy's argument draws on research showing that willpower functions almost like a muscle that fatigues with use throughout a single day, meaning the version of you making decisions at 9 in the morning has access to a completely different amount of self-control than the exhausted version of you facing the same temptation at 9 at night. Trying to out-willpower your environment day after day is trying to win a fight you're guaranteed to eventually lose, not because you're flawed, but because the entire premise of the fight was built on a resource that was never designed to be unlimited. The philosopher Aristotle observed that we are what we repeatedly do, and excellence, then, is not an act but a habit. Hardy's book is, in effect, a modern argument for taking that observation more literally than most people do. If excellence is a habit rather than a single heroic act of will, then the real work isn't gritting your teeth through one difficult moment. It's engineering a life where the difficult moment rarely has to be fought at all. Asterisk, your environment is already choosing for you. Asterisk, Hardy's central replacement for willpower is environment design, the deliberate shaping of your physical and social surroundings so that the behavior you want becomes the path of least resistance, rather than something you have to consciously fight for using a depleting resource every single time. His argument rests on a simple but easily overlooked observation. Your environment is never neutral. It's already influencing your behavior constantly, whether you've designed it deliberately or not. A kitchen with junk food visible on the counter is an environment actively working against a health goal, whether or not the person standing in it has enough willpower that particular evening. A phone with every notification enabled is an environment actively working against focus, regardless of how disciplined its owner considers themselves. The question was never whether your environment shapes your behavior. It always does. The only real question is whether you're the one shaping it, or whether it's been left to shape itself by accident. Hardy points to research on food placement in cafeterias, where simply moving healthier options to eye level and less healthy options further away, with zero change in actual availability or price, measurably shifted what people chose, without anyone needing to exercise a single ounce of additional willpower. The behavior changed because the environment changed, not because anyone became more disciplined overnight. Asterisk asterisk 20 steps in one direction. Not one step in 20 directions asterisk asterisk. One of the book's most quoted lines captures its core diagnosis of why most people fail to change. Success isn't really that complicated. It simply requires taking 20 steps in a single, consistent direction. Most people instead take one step in 20 different directions, scattering effort across too many simultaneous goals, none of which ever accumulate enough momentum to actually compound into anything. Hardy's argument here connects directly back to willpower's limited nature. If self-control is a finite daily resource, then splitting attention across 5 major goals at once doesn't multiply your chances of success. It divides an already limited resource 5 ways, guaranteeing that none of the 5 gets the sustained, compounding effort actually required to build genuine momentum. The person who picks one clear direction and channels every available bit of discipline toward it consistently outperforms the person spreading identical total effort across several fronts simultaneously. Not because the second person wants success less, but because compounding requires concentration, and concentration is exactly what scattered effort destroys. Asterisk asterisk designing commitment devices. Making the old path genuinely harder asterisk asterisk, Hardy pushes environment design a step further with what behavioral economists call commitment devices. Deliberate structures that make backsliding into an old behavior significantly more costly or difficult, precisely at the moment when willpower would otherwise be required to resist it. The classic historical example is the Greek general who ordered his own ships burned upon arrival at a hostile shore, deliberately removing retreat as an available option, so his soldiers' remaining effort could go entirely toward advancing rather than toward the ongoing psychological battle of deciding, moment to moment, whether to keep fighting or flee. Hardy's modern versions are considerably less dramatic, but function on the identical principle. Giving a friend money that only gets returned if a specific goal is met, deleting an app that requires a genuinely inconvenient process to reinstall, publicly committing to a deadline in front of colleagues whose opinion actually matters to you. Each of these works not by strengthening willpower, but by making the alternative to success meaningfully harder to choose. So the daily decision point that used to require depleting self-control simply stops being a live decision at all. Asterisk asterisk identity comes before behavior, not after asterisk asterisk. A recurring theme throughout the book concerns identity, and Hardy argues that most people get the sequence of change exactly backwards. The common assumption is, change your behavior consistently enough, and eventually your identity will catch up and shift to match it. Hardy's argument, drawing on both psychological research and his own doctoral work in this area, is that the sequence works far more reliably in the opposite direction. Shift your identity first, however deliberately or even artificially that shift begins, and the corresponding behavior follows with dramatically less friction than trying to grind out the behavior first and hope an identity eventually forms around it. A person trying to become a runner by relying purely on willpower to force themselves out the door each morning is fighting an identity that still, at some level, considers itself not really a runner. A person who has already begun to think of themselves as a runner, who has adopted the small identity markers, the gear, the language, the habit of mentioning it to others, finds the actual act of running considerably less effortful, because it's no longer a fight against self-image. It's simply an expression of an identity already, at least partly, adopted. Asterisk asterisk a full example. The man from the opening asterisk asterisk. Let's return to the man clearing out his fridge every January and apply Hardy's actual framework. rather than the willpower-based approach that had already failed him 4 years running. The old approach relied entirely on resisting temptation fresh, willpower-depleting resource, every single evening, an unwinnable long-term fight against a limited daily supply. Hardy's approach starts somewhere else entirely. Redesign the kitchen environment first, so the junk food simply isn't visible or conveniently accessible, removing the daily decision point rather than trying to win it through discipline each time. Add a genuine commitment device, a standing weekly grocery order that only includes specific, pre-approved foods, removing the moment-to-moment choice at the store where willpower would otherwise be required. And rather than declaring a single sprawling goal, get healthy. Pick the one specific behavior change that matters most and channel every bit of available discipline into that single direction consistently, rather than scattering identical effort across diet, exercise, sleep, and stress all at once. The identity shift comes last, but matters just as much. Rather than thinking I'm trying to eat better, which still frames health as an ongoing internal battle, Hardy's framework pushes toward, I'm someone who keeps a kitchen stocked with food that actually serves me. A small linguistic shift that, compounded daily, changes which choices even register as choices requiring effort at all. Asterisk now. Let's be honest, asterisk, every book like this deserves an honest accounting in return, and here it is. Hardy's dismissal of willpower as essentially useless overstates a genuinely more nuanced research picture. The willpower as a depleting muscle model the book leans on heavily, known in the research literature as ego depletion, has faced serious replication challenges over the past decade, with some large-scale follow-up studies finding the effect considerably smaller, or in some conditions not reliably present at all, compared to the original, more dramatic findings the popular version of this theory was built on. Willpower is real and does matter. The book's framing sometimes edges toward treating it as close to irrelevant, which the underlying science doesn't fully support. There's a second limitation worth nomming. Environment design assumes a meaningful degree of control over one's physical and social surroundings that not everyone has equal access to. Someone sharing a small kitchen with family members who won't change their own shopping habits, or working a job with unpredictable hours that make consistent environmental structuring difficult, faces real constraints that the book's often comfortable, professional class examples don't always account for. The framework is genuinely useful, but just redesign your environment is considerably easier advice to follow for some readers than others. Even with those caveats, the book's core, practical insight holds up well regardless of the specific mechanism debate. Deliberately shaping your surroundings to make a desired behavior the path of least resistance measurably outperforms relying purely on in-the-moment resolve, and concentrating effort in one clear direction consistently outperforms scattering identical effort across many goals at once. Whatever the precise underlying psychology, that basic strategic shift from fighting temptation to redesigning the fight away entirely has real, well-supported value. The takeaway stop treating willpower as your primary strategy and start treating your environment as the actual lever. Notice what your kitchen, your phone, your daily surroundings are already pushing you toward, and redesign the parts working against you rather than trying to out-discipline them each day. Pick one direction and take 20 steps in it, rather than one step in 20 scattered directions that never accumulate into anything. Build a real commitment device that makes backsliding genuinely harder, so the daily decision point simply stops requiring a fresh fight. And shift the identity first, even in small, deliberate ways. because behavior consistently follows identity far more easily than identity ever follows a behavior forced purely through grit. The man clearing out his fridge every January was never lacking desire. He had exactly as much desire in year 5 as he had in year 1. What he lacked was a strategy that didn't depend on a resource that was always going to run out by 9 at night. Hardy's real argument isn't that willpower doesn't matter at all. It's that building your entire plan around it was always going to be the hardest possible way to get where you actually wanted to go.